Hey, everybody, welcome to the Duke You Suck podcast. A little something different going on this week. I've decided to have myself as the guest. I thought it'd be interesting to have some fans send in some questions and, see what comes up. Yeah, guy gets interviewed a lot and gets asked, oftentimes the same question. So I thought it'd just be fun to let the fans kind of send in their questions and, just see what they had to say, because you never know. People ask some crazy questions sometimes. They don't know boundaries. Because there are quite a few questions and I like the sound of my own voice, I'm actually just going to dive right into this. Um, so the first one's from my buddy Dwayne, known him a very long time. He says, he gives me an ultimatum, actually. He says, I have 5 questions, answer 5 or none at all. So he wants to get controversial, says, was there ever a wrestler that I looked across the ring from that I thought, why am I in the ring with this bozo? Definitely there were a few guys that I wondered why they were in the ring, and that I wondered, were they ready more than anything? There's a couple guys that I didn't necessarily have great chemistry with personally, so I didn't think we'd have good matches. So I would, kind of avoid those things for sure. But I was always really lucky, man, to be honest with you, to have avoided anybody that I really, really, really kind of disliked working with. I had some dog shit matches with some guys, but that's not necessarily a tell on them or me personally. So I was pretty lucky that way. Like, I'm not trying to dodge the question, but there's no point burying anybody either, because it was, everybody started somewhere, and that was always my thing. It was never that somebody was really a bad person. It was more that they just weren't ready to be in the ring. What wrestler currently working would I come out of retirement to work with? I'm going to get nostalgic on this one. I might say Luther, just for the fact that if I could get a tag team together with Luther, his brother Ajax, follow him at Art of Ajax. He's a beauty. If I could get in a ring with those 2 guys and then tag up with my brother Crazy Dean Durango and have one last match, I would definitely come out of retirement to do that. I think that would be, fun as hell. And if we could somehow make that happen, I'd probably come out of retirement for that last match for sure. Closest I ever came to smacking a fan, a guy spit on me once. I gave him a bit of a shove. That was probably about it. Got to be careful at that. If I could pick one golf celebrity, if I could golf with one celebrity 18 holes, who would that be? Probably Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, man. He's just so down to earth. He's probably dog shit at golf like me. So I think that would actually be that would be a pretty fun twosome, him and I. He's pretty down to earth. I'm pretty down to earth. We could, just bullshit about music, and I could talk to him about wrestling, which I'm sure he wouldn't care about. Last but not least, pick any 4 people in the world I could get together to have dinner with and talk. Who's joining me? That's an interesting question. I went, my first thought when you asked that question, Dwayne, is, could I pick any 4 people, dead or alive? So I picked, dead and alive. The first 3 would be Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha. Just so I could sit down with these guys and see what the true intent was of what they had to say. Cause, there are people that their words of wisdom, for whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent, have affected the world, for a long time. And to me, that would be an interesting conversation. And, to actually round that out, I would probably throw somebody, like a Vince McMahon in there just to see what the hell happened. I think that'd be an interesting conversation. My buddy Don asks, what is the biggest missed opportunity in my career? Probably the first WWE tryout that somebody said they could get me. I'm not going to name drop or anything like that, but, to be completely 100% honest, I had 3 kind of opportunities that I could have got dark matches with the WWE. But 2 of them I don't honestly think would have materialized into anything. But the very first one, we definitely should have took that one, but we didn't know much about the business at that time. We were just breaking in. We kind of shit the bed on that deal. But, otherwise, that would probably be the biggest one. If I was performing, Don also asked, if I weren't performing in the ring, what job would I see myself doing in a promotion? I would think definitely booking, or training at the very least. I really, really love coaching and helping young guys along. I think that's why I kind of stuck around so long, was to try to help, sort of pass some of the stuff I learned from some of the smart guys that I came up with. So to me, that would be pretty cool. Don asks, who's my hero? Not to get too cheesy, probably my wife. She's the strongest person I know. She's a really, really amazing person. She's a really hard worker. She literally personifies what a good human being is. So really and truly, I know it sounds cheesy and cliche, but probably my wife's my hero. What makes this is going to make me cry. What makes me most proud when I look back on my life? Probably just the relationships I have. Don that's asking these questions I've known for, again, the better part of 20 years, actually 20 years now, I think. So that to me is really important, because I think in life, you have kind of three things, right? You have your word, your balls, and your relationships. And I don't think you break those for anybody. That's kind of how I feel about that. Why has Wendy put up with me for so many years? Because she has the patience of Job. If you don't know what that means, by all means, Google it. But yeah, my wife puts up with a lot, to say the least. Sorry, I keep saying Wendy puts up with a lot, to say the least. I'm a character, and I'm always pulling a rib, or I'm always trying to scare her, or I'm always doing something or saying something smart. So really and truly, if you don't believe in God, I appreciate that. But my wife is living proof that there's some sort of higher power looking out for me, because there's no way I did that on my own. So anyways, Mike Norris asks, do I think PWA missed the boat on anyone, a talent that we could have used maybe more prominently? I don't know if timing was an issue, but definitely think, I don't know how many people remember Belle Levitz, but she was somebody that worked with Natty Neidhart so many times. And I think that Belle was really somebody that, given more, we just didn't have a lot of lady talent around at that time, and the promoters didn't have a lot of money to be bringing in new talent. So she was somebody that didn't get a lot of opportunity, but I really think somebody that had a lot of personality, and she was a really, really, really talented worker. And I really think she just didn't get her due. And that is sort of disappointing. My buddy Roy, or some people would know him as Rooster, is asking, name a wrestler from the 70s that I would have loved to work with. I'm going to say Roddy Piper, just because he started in the 70s. He was somebody, man, he had so much personality. I think with him working heel, he could working babyface or heel, no matter what, he could tear me apart on the microphone. And I think that we could go in there and I could see myself just beating the shit out of him, wrestling around an entire arena, just scrapping it out. So Roddy Piper would probably be, that would almost be a dream match for me. I think that would just be one hell of a brawl. My buddy Ivan Noel Tex Gaines asks, best and worst match in my career that I was in. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't really remember a lot of bad matches, not because there weren't any, because I can remember, but I don't really remember who they were with. I do remember, Carl, don't be offended by this, because Carl LeDuc and I, who I'm very, very friendly with and close with now, so I don't want him to take this out of context, but we had a match in Drumheller one time that just fell apart, and it almost turned into a shoot. And to be quite frank, it was an absolute abortion. Like that was probably one of the worst matches I ever had. Probably the best match I ever had, and maybe it's for fondness, I don't know if overall technique or psychology, I'm not going to say that, but probably the best match I ever had was with Pistol Pollock in the Pavilion. Stampede relaunching in Calgary at that time, I want to say April 2nd, 1999. We went 25 or 30 minutes in the Pavilion in front of a packed house, and that was probably my favorite. And then that's got it. I don't know if I have any, other than lots of times getting to wrestle my brother, which, is always a highlight, because we had so much fun wrestling in the ring together. Aiden, my buddy Aiden Singh Pringle, which shout out to Aiden. This is his t-shirt, actually. Got gimmicks. You get hold of Aiden Sin, Sinn Pringle, and he can hook you up with one of these tees. He asks, how did I end up in the dungeon? And that's actually a question I get asked a fair bit. Excuse me. To be honest, pro wrestling was an afterthought for me. My brother and I and my best friend Pistol Pollock had been amateur wrestling for about 10 years, and all had kind of stopped that, and we're coaching amateur wrestling. Our coach would make us go up to Mount Royal University and coach wrestling to 6-year-old kids at 9:00 on Saturday mornings. And up there was where we first met TJ TJ Wilson and Matthew Annis. And we didn't get to coach them for too long. Unfortunately, there was kind of some stuff. The club didn't stick around that long, but that was our first contact with the Hearts. And then at that time, because we were coaching there, this is a bit of a story. Because we were coaching there, BJ, who owned BJ's gym and was Matthew's dad, was impressed that these, 22, 23-year-old kids that get out of bed at, 8:00 Saturday morning, all hung over as much as we were, to show up and coach these little grassroots kids wrestling. And not that TJ and Matthew were 6, they were like 13-year-olds at that time. And so he gave us gym memberships out of the goodness of his heart. He said, you guys volunteer your time. He was impressed with that. So he gave us memberships, and shout out to BJ for doing so, because not a lot of people would have done that. And it was there that we really started to develop our relationship with the Hearts. And so Harry Smith at that time, his family, I believe, had moved back from Florida, if my memory serves correct. And he wanted to wrestle with the guys that Matthew had been working out with, which was us. We were easy to find because we were down at the gym. So long story longer, we started training a lot of the Hart grandchildren down at BJ's gym, just started our own little amateur wrestling club down there. And they came to us and asked if we were interested in pro wrestling. And at first we weren't necessarily, but they kind of told us that maybe we could make a living wrestling. And for me, that was a big deal. So the lure of pro wrestling was one thing, but the lure to make a living wrestling was really what drew me there. And yeah, man, that's kind of how we just ended up at the dungeon. I never really knew I wanted to turn pro. Aiden asked how old was I when I knew I wanted to turn pro. I never really knew. Like I guess I was 20. Let's say I was 24. I get, it sounds funny because we started training and we went up to the house to train the first time, and we went through a workout at the dungeon, ran on a treadmill. I nearly puked my guts out. And Bruce Hart said, okay, we'll see you next weekend. And it wasn't even a thought. We said, yeah, okay, we'll just see you next week, because we had that, at the time, player coach mentality where you just did what the coach told you to do. See you next week. Okay, see you next week, coach. So we never gave it a lot of thought. We just showed up. And then, fast forward, we trained, and I had my first match, which was against Ted Hart at the Rockyford Rodeo, or the Rockyford pay-per-view, as we called it. And a fan threw garbage at me. And that was when I knew I wanted to be a pro wrestler. That was when I knew I was going to stick with it. And this is what I really wanted to do. And last but not least, who was in the dungeon when I started? When I went to the dungeon the very first time, there was myself, my brother Dean, and Greg Pistol Pollock. And the guys that were in the dungeon at that time were Kerwin Bostic and Ivan Thompson, or Tex Gaines, and a guy called Chance Beckett. And his first name is Sean, and unfortunately I can't remember his last name now. I'm sure someone will tell us in the comments later. But those were the 3 guys at the dungeon. And then shortly after that, Hotshot Johnny Devine and his buddy, a guy named Vince, came in and sort of started to build a pretty stacked roster with the guys that started coming in after that. My boy Bob wants to know, what is my favorite comeback to a fan chirping you? I have a lot. It kind of depends. It kind of depends what. Yeah, like I've only had a fan really make me break character a couple of times, and the worst part of that is I can't really remember what they said to me. But I know there's been a couple fans that can go. I consider myself a pretty good mouth. And there's been a couple fans out there that go toe to toe and one up me easily a couple times. It just, burned me so bad. I'm still standing there smoking if you go look. But I wish I could remember what they said, because I've had some pretty sassy things shouted out at me. Bob also asks, did I ever chirp at someone and think, I might have actually gone too far and crossed the line? There's one definite time I did. And I've talked about this before. My wife was at a show, and she usually sat on this one particular kind of back corner of the arena. And for whatever reason, she was sitting in the wrong spot for sure, but she was sitting kind of right by where we would come out to the ring. And as I came out to the ring and did my rounds, hollering rude things to the fans, there was a lady standing in the crowd with a baby in swaddle. And I couldn't see the baby. I could just see the lady holding the baby. And I was, hollering the fans, telling them they were stupid morons or something. And I looked at the lady and I said, "You and your ugly baby, lady." And my wife was standing behind that particular lady, and I just seen her put her hands up like this. And my wife has heard me say a lot of bad things, and I'd never seen her make that face before. So at that point, I thought, that I might have gone too far. And that was the first time. And my wife had been to hundreds of shows. She's seen me wrestle hundreds of times. And that was the only time she met me at the door when I came home and said, "You cannot tell that lady she has an ugly baby." So at that time, I probably did go a little too far. Red Thunder wants to know who would win a match. My original wrestling character, the name given to me by the great Bruce Hart, Dirty Dick Reigns, or my own incarnation, Dirty Duke Durango. That's a tough question. I would have to go with Dirty Duke Durango simply because Duke Durango had the wisdom of experience. In both of their peaks and both of their primes, I would just have to give Duke Durango the edge on experience. That's an interesting question, though. My missus asks, of the hundreds and hundreds of road trips, what's one of my funniest and fondest memories with the boys? Probably there's a couple, but I don't want to embarrass anybody because some of there's always rude stories, but there was one where I was riding with Jason the Sledgehammer Anderson, shout out brother, and the late Tiger Khan, rest in peace, and Greg Pistol Pollock. And we got in the car and just talked kind of philosophy and religion for 3 hours on the way home from a road trip. And it always struck me as funny that, people kind of call wrestlers that, that we're maybe dumb or we don't think too much because, we'll let somebody bash us in the chair for $100 a night, and somewhat fair enough. But at the same time, to be able to, be with guys and witness the Northern Lights with them, start talking about science or, sit and talk about something bigger than yourself, or, you're in a place where there's no light noise. So you can see the stars. You can, you kind of feel like you can see the whole Milky Way. You kind of see the universe differently. And so that was probably my favorite trip. I mean, maybe not the funniest trip, but that was a really, really, really good trip. And it really sticks out in my mind. And I don't think I'll ever forget that one. All right. So let's click over to, I got some more questions on a different page. My friend Harmony wants to know how I scored such an amazing, beautiful woman. She's asking for a friend. The truth is, I believe in a higher power. If people don't know me, that's just the truth. And I believe that higher power somehow guided this amazing woman into my life, because if you look at my background and the way I talk and the way I carry myself, there's no way I should have a wife that good. Having said that, I don't talk to my wife the way I talk to wrestling fans, in all honesty. So yeah, like I honestly lucked into it, Harmony. I don't know how I got such an amazing wife. No disrespect to any of the other wives that might see this, but my wife is the greatest wife on the planet. Rick Serrano III. This is a guy I love. I met him through podcasting, and he's somebody that I'm getting to know a little better, and he's dynamite guy. Follow him on Instagram and Twitter and all that. Rick Serrano III. He wants to know, if Owen Hart doesn't pass away, what would his career have looked like? That's an interesting question, because Owen always wanted to play kind of a pretty wholesome character. He didn't want to push the envelope the way maybe the way DX and stuff did. So I don't know what would have happened, but at the same time, I always say that talent always prevails. So, I honestly see Owen kind of working a few more years, probably getting a WWE title run at some point, and then kind of riding off into the sunset to be a dad. That's, if I really had to run it down real quick, that's probably what I see for Owen is, like say a couple more years, run into the top, a title run, and then, he probably packs it in. Andy Lewis asks, this is a very interesting question. Guys I would have liked to work with, but never got the opportunity. Probably one of the top on that list is actually Andy Lewis. Andy, you're somebody that I really respect. I admire your work, the way you trip the crowd, the way you work a crowd reminds me very much of myself. I actually think you and I could have been a hell of a tag team, but I, kind of jumped into bed with that Chris Steele a little too early, and then look what happened to us. So yeah, Andy, you're definitely one of the guys I would have loved that opportunity to work with. AJ Styles is somebody that was in the territory a few times. I really would have liked to work with him. Definitely, I think him and I could have had some fun matches together. That I mean, there's not a lot. I definitely, I guess if we're not just straight up talking local guys, I'm going to go crazy here. I sure would have liked to work somebody like an Okada. You know what I mean? I would have liked to work Samoa Joe. I think him and I really would have beat the shit out of each other. I think that would have been a fun match. I could go on like this forever, actually, now that you're talking about it. If we're just talking dream matches, I would like to have Eddie Guerrero carry me around the ring for about 20 minutes. That would be a dream come true. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot. It's, but local guys, I was really lucky, man, because I was the booker for a lot early in my career, way sooner than I should have been. So I got to kind of book myself into main event spots with the main event guys that were here. So I got to always work with, tag team with the Apocalypses or, Vic the Space Lord. And I got to work with, Tyson Kidd or TJ Wilson. I got to work with Harry Bulldog Smith all the time. There's another guy around that time, Dave Swift, got to work with him a lot, and Hotshot Johnny Devine. So I got to work with some studs. So I'm really lucky, actually, the crop of talent that I came up with. I feel really, really fortunate. My friend Stacy asks, what is my favorite movie to watch over and over again? I have actually a few of these. My top favorite would be Pulp Fiction or Goodfellas. Those two are kind of hand in hand for me. I would say tell you to watch them, but I really have to be careful with that because they're both really violent, a lot of bad language. So if that's your thing, by all means, you should definitely watch those movies. If that's not your thing, do not under any circumstances watch those movies. But also The Hangover. I can watch The Hangover over and over and over and over again. It's the funniest movie of all time. My cats are named after The Hangover. I have multiple Hangover t-shirts. I might be actually the biggest hangover mark in the league. Michael Allen Richard Clark, the man with the longest name in professional wrestling, wants to know, and also the funniest guy, Google Michael Allen Richard Clark on YouTube and find his channel and subscribe. This guy's absolutely hilarious. He wants to know what my top 5 horror movies or top 5 movies in general. I don't really watch a lot of horror movies. For me, kind of Friday the 13th was the last horror movie that really scared me, to be honest, when I was a kid. So other than that, I'd say my top 5 movies in general would probably be, Pulp Fiction, Goodfellas, and The Hangover. Then I'd probably I'm going to throw in the Pitch Perfect franchise. And if you don't like that, you can go to hell. But I'm going to put the Pitch Perfect franchise all in one group as one movie, and then throw in We're the Millers for good measure, and then obviously mention to Anchorman. Drew Dolby says, "Is there an alternate universe where Duke Durango had a career long and storied babyface run before retiring to host the Duke Your Swell podcast?" That's a really good question. Because I believe that there might be multiple universes, I have to believe that if there's multiple universes, there has to be infinite universes. So if I believe in infinite universes, that would probably mean I somehow would believe in parallel universe. And if I believe in parallel universe, then I would have to believe that there would be a bizarro universe in which there would be a babyface Duke Durango and a Duke Your Swell podcast. So the answer to that is, yeah, I believe that alternate universe exists. Sorry, I need a drink. My man, Jason Clevitt, one of my favorite wrestling media personalities of all time, says, if you wanted to pursue a career in the industry in, say, the mid 2000s, which of the 4 main promotions, WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, New Japan, do you think would have been the best fit? For me, I think New Japan, to be honest. That was more my style of wrestling. I love the chain wrestling. I love the hard wrestling. I love, I like to let the other guy know I'm there. Within reason. Sometimes they get a little excited dumping each other on their heads with those suplexes, but for sure, I think New Japan. I think it would have been at that time in that era, probably the best place for me. Part B, since you, oh boy, this is flattering. Since you have such a great mind for the business, genuinely, fantasy book your debut first feud. Well, geez, that's a long answer. Geez, now I got to think back to who was around New Japan at that time. I'm going to skip part B just because I can't remember who was, kind of who was there at that time. But somebody like Naito, I think I could have had some pretty strong matches in a break-in, but I really think like somebody like and I know they wouldn't let two gaijins work together like that, but I really think that at the time when Harry and TJ were going over there, in Apocalypse, I really think that us guys could have really had a fun faction to really tear shit down over there. I think there would have been a really, really fun opportunity because we had, some size, some speed, some technique, and then, a big mouth to really round out the team. So I think that would have been a really fun run in New Japan in sort of the mid 2000s. My friend Perry Delbridge wants to know what's Bill Yates up to these days. Truth is, Perry, I don't care. Not a fan of the guy, not somebody that's on my Christmas card list, to be honest with you. So yeah, that's that about Bill Yates. Lastly, let's just talk a little bit about the UFC. I want to talk about Conor McGregor and his last performance. This is big news for those of you that don't watch. You should Google Conor McGregor leg injury. Be prepared to see a horrific leg break. First of all, I just want to say I want to give a shout out to Conor McGregor. I wish a speedy recovery to Conor McGregor. I hope he has a full recovery. I hope he fights again. I do not want to see somebody go out like that. Having said that, and also full respects to a man going out on a shield. These guys risk everything when they get in that ring. They know full well there's a chance they might not walk out of that ring. And unfortunately, Saturday night, Conor McGregor didn't walk out of the ring. But, thankfully he can recover. I also want to say, be careful what kind of shit you talk to people. When you start threatening a man's life before you fight him, there's a real chance he could die. And people say, yeah, but that's cool. That sells tickets, that sells fights. And I appreciate that. But before you threaten a person's life, before you talk before that comes out of your mouth, you need to ask yourself the question, what if this actually happens? And whether your intent to actually kill that person or not was there, you will live with that for the rest of your life, that you said, I'm going to kill this person. And it really happened. Whether you meant it to or not, you put your name on that shit. Do not talk that way in your promos. Do not talk that way in your promos. There's never a reason to talk like that. There's never a reason to talk about a man's wife. There's never a reason to talk about a man's family or a woman's husband or a woman's family for that matter. You should be able to draw enough heat by just, if you need to trash talk, you trash talk your opponent. You don't bring your family into it, and you never threaten to kill somebody. That is the dumbest thing you can say before you enter a cage fight. I don't care. You can at me. Feel free to comment below. Feel free to send me private messages if you don't want to publicly, kind of dog on me. I don't care. That's the dumbest shit you can say in a ring. And on that level, Conor McGregor, you got what you had coming to you because you can't talk that way. The universe works. Karma's a bitch. Don't act like that, people. Be better to each other. Love each other. Respect each other. That's coming from a guy that is reformed. I was not always the nicest guy. I was not always the easiest guy to deal with. But I'm telling you right now, you slide easier on honey than sandpaper. And it's okay to shit talk and sell a fight. It's okay to talk shit and sell a match. I have no problem with that. But when you start telling somebody you're going to kill them and shitting on their family or shitting on their religion, look what happened when you fought Khabib. Same thing, talking about a man's wife, talking about a man's religion. And he stands over Conor McGregor, punching him in the face, telling him, let's talk now. And look what happened. So put a rein on the shit you talk. The other thing I want to say is this is a bit of a promo class now. Be careful, especially if you're a babyface wrestler, how hard you trash your opponent. Because as a babyface, you need to have beat a big person. You need to have beat a big challenge. So if you go on there as the babyface and say, this guy's a bum, he's got nothing, he can't lace my boots, that all might actually be true. But if you say it, who did you beat? You beat a bum. You beat somebody that can't lace your boots. You beat somebody that can't do what you can do. So really, at the end of the day, all you're doing is diminishing your own accomplishment when you talk that way. So be very, very, very careful how you talk about your opponent. Respect each other. Fighting is about respect. As much as about knocking each other's brains out, it's about respect. It's about respecting the fighter. It's about respecting the tradition of fighting. And it's about the honor of getting in the cage and competing, or getting in a wrestling ring and competing, or most importantly, for me, getting on a wrestling mat and competing. Honor and respect your sports. honor, and respect your opponents. On that note, everybody, thank you very, very much for tuning in. I hope you stayed and watched the whole thing. If you did, full marks to you for putting up with it. And if you want to see me again, hit me up. We'll probably do this again sometimes if it gets a lot of views, or if you guys are entertained by it, let me know. We'll do her again. On that note, bye, everybody.